Okay, I guess I'll get started. So I'll quickly recap a bit about the app which we have built so far. So let me just start the app first. Sorry about that. Just a second. Okay, so to start the app, we will first activate the virtual environment, and then we'll run the command python manage.py run server. When we run that, we can see that our server has started at this particular URL. We can open that in Chrome, and this is our app. Now, as you remember from the last tutorial, we were mostly working with the admin panel, which is this, and we can log in into this panel as an admin, or we could log in as a client. So for example, Domino's. Okay. If you wanna know more about this app, I have a video on my channel in which I built this app from scratch, so you should definitely go and check that out. But let us just see what features we have given the admin. So an admin can add candidates. For example, we can go into this page, click on add candidate and add a new candidate. Say food, 12, mail, any mobile number, city, expected salary, and will appear over here. Now what about the this is basically a job portal where the admins will provide the clients will put with potential candidates for their jobs. So client would put up a job listing. So if I go into the jobs, right now there is no job, but I can log in as the client, which is Domino's, and I can add a job. So say the job is for delivery guy, minimum age 1, maximum age 10, salary 1000, number of 1, and just save it. Now if I log in again as an admin, then I can see the job over here, and I can also see which is the client which created this job. Now what an admin will do is he'll go to the job and then he can assign candidates to this job. So for example, I looked at the description and I think that Jane is a good candidate for the job. So I'll assign Jane and click on save. Now the job of the admin is done. When the client logs in again into the portal and goes into the job, he would see that there is a candidate assigned to this particular job, and then they can either accept it or reject it. So this is a very basic job portal, and it was built entirely using the Django admin panel. We didn't write any HTML code for this. Okay, so now coming back to today's session, I've written some notes about what we will be covering today. So here are the new requirements for the app. So as we discussed before, there are two types of users for our app. We have the admin user and the client user. Now, one of the requirements which we want is an admin should be able to add candidates through an Excel file. So admins would generally have like hundreds or 200 or thousands of candidates, and they can't input each and every candidate manually into the portal. So such a feature would be really useful to us. Secondly, right now if you go to the list of candidates, we just see the name and the phone number. It would be nice if we can see the other columns here as well. So this is the second requirement. And other than that, the admin should also be able to filter the list of candidates based on their gender, city, etc. Okay. Also, while assigning candidates, the admin should know which candidate is available or not. So that is something which we will need to show to the admin. Now for the client, there is just one additional requirement, then that the client should be able to review candidates for all the jobs on a single page. So if a client has posted like 10 jobs, so there should be a single page where he can see the candidates assigned to each and every job and then update them in bulk. Okay, and if we have time, I'll also show how we can deploy this particular application to a Linux server. All right, I guess we can get started now. So let's start with this first feature, which is to import candidate data through an Excel file. For doing this, importing from CSV or Excel is quite a common requirement. And whenever there are requirements like this in Django or in any Python application for that matter, you would surely find an existing library which will do the job. So for Django as well, there is a library called ImportExport that allows us to add the option to import data through an Excel file. So whenever it comes to using a library like this, you are not required to understand the entire library and understand each and every function of the library. No one would know that. What happens generally is, whenever you want to use a particular library, you would go to the library page, you would see the documentation, try and find the thing which you want to implement, and then get the code from the documentation and use it in your code. Okay, so the first thing is the installation. So as you can see, installation is really easy. We just need to install the library using pip install, and we need to add this module in our installed app settings. Okay, so let's do that now. So I'll create a new terminal over here, and I'll do pip install Django import export. Now this is done. I'll go to my settings.py file. Inside my install app, I'll add this module. Whenever you install a Django library, you would always have to add it to the installed app list in the settings.py file. Okay, so our installation is done. Now let's see. Our requirement is to add this feature in our admin panel. So let's go to the documentation regarding the admin panel. I think it is in the getting started section. Yep, admin integration. So as you can see, we would have to define a custom admin class, and instead of extending the class from models.modelAdmin, we'll extend it from ImportExport modelAdmin. By the way, I don't know if there is anyone listening to this right now, but if you want me to stop at any point, feel free to tell me and I'll stop. Okay, so let's go to our admin.py file. Right now we have not used any custom admin for the candidate, so let's define one. Okay, and it needs to extend import export model admin, and we'll need to import this. So let's this import this. Okay, and while registering the model to the admin side, we'll provide our custom admin. Now what else do we need? So we need a resource class. In case of, but as you can see, they haven't defined how to make a resource class over here. So for that, we'll have to backtrack a little bit, and let's see where they have defined how to make a resource class. Okay, it's here. So to make a resource class, we need to import the resources modules from this particular library, and creating a resource class is very easy. You just need to specify which model you want the resource to be from, and create this class. So let's do that. In our case, we'll name it candidate resource. And it needs to import, it needs to extend from resources.model resource. Okay, what else do we need to define? We need to specify our model in the meta class. Which is candidate. Okay, now that is done, and in our custom admin class, we'll use this particular class which we just built as the resource class, and that is it. Now if we go back to our admin panel, we see we now have the import and export buttons over here. Let us try export once and see what happens. So it is asking us for the format. Let's go with TSV, and we got a file. Let me just open it up in Google Sheets. Okay, now as you see, we had 4 candidates, and the data of all the 4 candidates have been exported in this TSV file. A TSV file is just as good as an Excel file. TSV stands for tab separated. I think it is tab separated value. I'm not sure. Okay, so the export feature is working. Now let's see if we can use this to update as well. So let us change this name to who YouTuber. Let's change this to just Pranav Tiwari, and let's change the mobile number to 0000 or something like that. Now we'll download it again with the TSV, and let us try the import function. So we'll have to specify a file. The format is TSV. Click on submit. It will give you a preview of the changes which we are about to make. So as you can see, the mobile number is changing, the name is changing, the name is changing for this one as well. You confirm the import, and the values have changed. Yeah, Andrew, comma separated values is CSV. TSV is tab separated value. It is the same thing, just instead of a comma we use a \t or a tab to separate the values. So TSV we generally use if suppose you might have values such as addresses, yeah, which would already have commas inside of them. So in that case we'll use the TSV. Okay, so import is working at least for editing candidates. Now our original aim was to add new candidates, right? So suppose I include a new row, say who new, age is 30, male, any random number, just say London. Okay, now if you see I haven't specified any ID for this new candidate. This is because these IDs are auto generated by Django, so we don't need to specify them explicitly. We only need to specify them if we want to edit an existing candidate. Okay, now let's download this and import. As you can see, it has added a new row and it has already assigned the ID automatically, which is 5. Confirm it and it's done. So it's really that simple. With just 2 additional classes and a library, we are able to add the first feature which we require, which is the ability to import candidate data in bulk. Now obviously this is a very trivial use case, but this library is very robust. It will allow you to handle complicated cases as well. For example, if you want to modify some fields before putting them into the DB, you can do that as well. But yeah, we won't go into that today, but yeah, it has that ability to do that. Okay, now moving on to the next feature, which is the admin should be able to see the candidate basic info in the list view. This again is really simple. So we want suppose the candidate age and gender to be displayed in this list view. Right now, to see the age of this candidate, you have to go inside and then see it, but we want it to be displayed in the list as well. Now generally how we would do that is let me go to the admin page of jobs. So we have actually done that for job admin. So if you go back to the job, you can see that we are showing the name of the job as well as the creator of the job, and to do that we had used a list display. We were able to use list display because we were inheriting from admin.modelAdmin. In this case we are inheriting from ImportExport modelAdmin. So I mean the question arises there whether we will be able to use the same thing here or not. So you can check that very quickly. If you go to ImportExport modelAdmin, you would see that it itself inherits from admin.modelAdmin. So whatever fields were available to admin.modelAdmin, they will be available to the ImportExport modelAdmin as well. So we can simply use the list display here as well. So the age, gender, and what was the name of that field will relocate. Yeah. Okay, now let's go back to the candidates page, and you can see now we are seeing the list, but the name of the candidate has disappeared, so we'll add that back as well. Okay, so this is much better and much cleaner. So yeah, our second requirement is also done. It's quite easily done. Now let's go to the third one. Third is the admin should be able to filter candidates based on their gender, city, and the willingness to relocate. In order to filter something in the admin, now let me show you what you would do if you were new to Django and you didn't know how you will add such a filter. I think half of coding is basically knowing what to Google, right? So let me show you what you would have to Google to do that. So I'll probably add, how do I add filters to Django admin panel? And on the first result itself, you'll see that the attribute which you want to use is the list filter attribute of the model admin object. And so it's that easy. So even if you are new to Django, you can simply Google this stuff. So we want to filter based on gender, city, and willingness to relocate. Okay, so let's specify the city here as well. And in the list filter, we specify city, gender, and will relocate. Now if you go back to our candidates admin page, you can see we have these filters now, and in order to use them you just have to click on them. So if I want to filter by the gender, I click on male, and now only the male candidates are visible. So this sort of speed of development is what makes the Django admin panel so good. If we wanted to make this from scratch and make the HTML in the front end ourselves, this would take a lot of time. Even if you use any pre-existing themes, you would still need to write a lot of code to get all this filtering logic in place. Okay, now this is done. The next requirement is the admin should be able to see which candidates are available and which are engaged with a job. Okay, this one is a bit tricky. Now what the output which we want is, in this table there should be another column at the end which should tell me whether this particular candidate is engaged in a job or not. Okay, now the only till now the only columns which we have added were the direct fields of our model. So name, mobile, age, gender, will relocate, and city were the direct fields of this particular model, and we don't have any field which would tell us whether this candidate is engaged in a job or not. Okay, so you might be tempted to just add another field over here, and whenever a candidate gets a job, then you can update the field and you will see the status over here. While that might work, but that would not be a good approach, because whether a candidate is engaged in a job or not, that information is already being stored in the candidate job map. This is the table in which we are mapping the candidates to the jobs. So if we save the data here and here in both the places, that would cause redundancy, and that would always lead to issues when your app gets bigger. So you don't want to save any data twice. So what do we do now? The thing which would help us here is that when we want to display columns, not only can we use the direct fields, we could use any functions which we defined for this particular class as well in the list display. Let me give you an example. Suppose I want in a column I want to display yes. So right now in will relocate it is displaying the cross, right? And if I remove the filter, it is either displaying the OK sign or the cross. What if I want to display yes or no over here? Okay, so I'll create a new field over here. I'll call it will relocate str. Okay, you can name it anything, and here I'll check for the will relocate boolean. If self.will relocate, then I'll return a yes, else I'll return a no. Okay, so for this particular candidate, if I call this function, it will either return yes or no based on this will relocate field. So now this function can also serve as a column in the admin panel. So I just have to specify the function over here, and if I relocate the field, relocate the page, you'll see that another column has been added, and it is displaying the value which is returned by this function. So the difference between this column and this column is that this is displaying a direct field, while this is displaying a method which is defined on that particular object. So let's just remove this because we don't need this, but this would help us in creating the engaged column. So since we don't have a field, we'll create a function. So let's name our function def is engaged, and for now let's just return yes for everything, and we'll refer to the function over here. We have this column. Right now it is just returning yes for everything. That is fine. We know that we have to modify the code here in order to return yes if the candidate has a job or has been assigned to a job, otherwise no. Now how do we find that? We know that whenever a candidate is assigned to a job, that candidate would appear in the candidate job map. Okay, so we just need to find whether candidate job map has our candidate or not. So that is pretty easily done. So let's create a new variable called jobs and assign it to candidate job map dot objects dot filter, and we'll filter by the key candidate. Okay, now this will return all the jobs in which this particular candidate has been assigned. Now we just have to check the length of this particular list. So if this list is empty, then our candidate is free, so we'll return no, otherwise we'll return yes. Okay, now let's reload our page, and you can see this particular candidate is engaged while the other are not engaged, and this is actually correct because this was the candidate which we assigned to the job. We can see this in action as well. Suppose we go to the job and assign another candidate, say foo new, and save it. If we go back to the list of candidates, then foo new is engaged as well. So yes, another requirement has been fulfilled and we have still yet to write any HTML code. Okay, one more thing to note here is that whenever a candidate is mapped to a job, we also link a status to it, and the status can have three possible values: pending, accepted, and rejected. So a candidate would be engaged only if the status is either pending or the status is accepted. If the status is rejected, then the candidate is not engaged, then the candidate is free. So we'll have to look for that as well. So when we are finding these particular jobs in the filter, we have to add the filter for status as well. Okay, so the first filter is that the candidate is equal to self. Now we can do this two ways. Either we can create a list of status which are engaged. So status engaged, this list would have two type of values. The pending status would also be called engaged and the accepted would also be called engaged, and then we can filter by this particular list using status in. Now let's test this. Right now both Funyu and Jane are engaged. Suppose the client logs into the panel, goes to the job and rejects Jane. So now Jane should become free again. Let us check that. So I'll log in again as the admin, go to the candidates, and you can see that Jane is no longer engaged. So this was one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would have been to just exclude the rejected candidates. So we could have done the same thing using a dot exclude. And we'll exclude the status rejected. And it still works. Okay, so yeah, there can be more than one ways to solve something. It's just based on whatever you like. So I prefer the filter one, not the exclude one, so I'll change it back to that one. Okay, so all four of our admin requirements are now fulfilled. The admin is able to inject the data in bulk through an Excel file or a TSV file in our case, which is basically the same thing. We have added the details to the list view as well, and we are able to filter the candidates based on gender, city, and the willingness to relocate. By the way, these are real requirements which I got from the client. The client is basically just a friend in this case, but these are actual requirements. Yeah. Now let's go back to our client admin panel. This is the last requirement which we need to work on. The client should be able to review the candidates from all the jobs on a single page. Okay, so for that we'll have to log in as the client now. And let's add another job. So say line cook, salary 1000, number of opening, done. So now we have two jobs, and let us assign some candidates to these jobs as well. So the admin will go, it will go to the job. So for the delivery guy we already assigned two people. For the line cook we'll again assign two people. say for YouTuber and Pranav Tiwari, and save it. Now log in again as the client. So right now I have to go individually into each job page and see the candidates, right? But a better thing would be if there was a single page where I could see all the candidates and possibly filter the candidates based on the job or based on their basic details. So we'll add that now. So what we need to add is we need to add this candidate job map into the admin panel. So let's go to admin.py and first let's just add this directly. So admin.site.register. Let me import the model. Okay, we reload the page. We are seeing candidate job maps and we are seeing the list of candidates and the jobs over here. So we have made some progress. Now right off the bat, the first thing which we need to do is we should rename this particular thing, because candidate job map doesn't look good. We should rename this to something like review candidates, so the client would be able to understand that better. One way to do that is to go to your model and add a meta tag. So class meta, and I think it is verbose name ruler. I might be wrong, but let's just try this. Okay, yep. So if you go to your model and define a verbose name ruler, so this means the candidates which will the name which will come here, and in this way it becomes more readable for the client. Okay, what else do we need to change here? I think we should add a list view here as well, a list display, just like we did for the candidates. For that we'll have to define a custom admin class. So let us name this review candidate admin, and we don't need the import feature over here, so it will just inherit from admin.modeladmin. And let us add the same list display, just without the is engaged thing. Okay, now this is going to fail. I'll show in a bit why this is failing. So if you can see the error here, the value of list display 5, which refers to city, not a callable, an attribute of review candidate admin or an attribute of candidate job map. So basically, in case of candidate admin, the model was candidate and candidate had all these fields. In case of review candidate admin, the model is candidate job map, and candidate job map doesn't have any of these fields. It only has candidate job status feedback, which is why we are not able to get this working. So I think we can get away by using methods over here as well. So this would be a bit cumbersome, but I guess we can do this. Yeah, so age would be self.candidate.age. We can do the same thing for gender and maybe city. So you get the idea. age, gender, city. Let's remove this for now. I guess we need the name and mobile as well. I think if we just include candidate, it should take care of the name and mobile, because the candidate model, in the str function of candidate model, we are getting the name and mobile. So this should work. Okay, the error is gone. If you go back here, we are seeing the candidate, we are seeing the age, the gender, and the city. What else? So we are not able to see here what job these candidates have been assigned to. So we need to add that as well. So I guess we can add that as the second column. So job we can add, because job is a direct field of candidate job map. And what this will do is, because this is a foreign key, it will go to the job model and it will return the whatever is written by the str function of the job model, which is the position name, which is what we need right now. So we have the job. What else? So now that we have the job, we can add the filter by the job as well. So we know we need to use list filter for that. So now the candidate can come to this page, he'll see all the candidates assigned, he can filter by a particular job and see the details of the candidates as well. But the requirement was not just to review, but to basically reject or accept a candidate from this particular page as well. So for that we'll need to add the status column to this page. And now Django admin has something called list editable. Just like we had the list filter, we have another cool thing called list editable. Inside list editable, you can provide the name of any column and Django will make that column editable. By the way, let me know whenever anyone has a doubt, I can stop. So just by adding this particular field, which is list editable, you can see that the status column now has a drop down and I can bulk reject all the candidates. Just have to click on save and 3 candidates were rejected. So this is quite a good page for from a client's perspective, because every client would have say like 10 jobs, and in general about 10 to 20 candidates would be assigned to each and every job. So each client would have to review say about 100 or so candidates. So it's a good thing if we are able to do that in bulk. Now let me see what other issues do we have with this particular page. One thing is that these fields are clickable. If you click on them, now if you see, I am logged in as the client, and as the client I should not be able to assign candidates. Correct? Client should only be able to review the candidates which have been assigned to them, not assign new candidates. So this clickable option should not be available for the client. That we can solve again just by setting this to none. Now how do I find that I have to use this particular field? Again, Google is your friend. Just type Django admin disable link to edit object or whatever, and you will see that this is what you need to do. Okay, now this is a simple list page. these things are not clickable. Okay, so I think this should be enough for today's session. We were able to complete all the tasks which we set out to do, and I think I still have about 15 minutes left. So I'll show you guys how to deploy this application to a Linux server as well. Till then, by the way, any questions so far? I know there is only about 1 or 2 people watching it live, but yeah, this could be a private lesson for you guys. So if there are any questions, let me know. Okay, never mind. So okay, deploying on a Linux server. So right now we are running this app locally. 127.0.01 is what we know as localhost. What that means is only a person who is using my computer, my laptop, can access this file. Also, someone who is connected to the same Wi-Fi will also be able to access it through the IP. But yeah, that is another thing. But what if I want to share this app with you guys as well? What if I wanted to send you guys a link and you could click on that link and then use the app? For that, you would have to host the app on some kind of a server. How do you get a server? Generally, you would use Linux server. Unless you are in like a corporate environment and you are forced to use a Windows server, you would probably use a Linux server for hosting your applications. How do you get a server? So there are various options available. I generally use AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. You could also use DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean, I think, is the quickest one. You can get a server for about $5 a month. On AWS, if you're a new user, I think you get about an year free for a small server. So I won't show how to actually create a server on AWS. That would be another DevOps tutorial. I already have a server made, and I'll just show you how I would deploy this app on this particular server. So every server would have an IP address. This is the address you would use to access this particular server. If I go to this right now, I won't see anything because there is nothing happening on that server right now. Okay, so first let us go into our server. So let me open a new terminal. Okay, so whether you use AWS or DigitalOcean, whenever you create a server there, you will find the instruction to connect to the server as well. It will probably be done by using an SSH command and either using a PEM file or using a username and password. Whatever the instructions are, they would be clearly mentioned in whatever portal you use. So I'm inside this server. Right now there is nothing in it. Okay. So the first thing which I need to do is I want to transfer my code to the server, because only once I transfer the code will I be able to run it. So some people would basically just copy paste their code to the server. A better approach is by using GitHub. So GitHub is basically a version control system. It allows you to share code between developers. So I've already created a Git repository for this particular app. Let me just search for that. Yeah. So this is the Git repository for this particular application. Let me just push the changes which I did right in this session into the Git repo. So git add start to add all the changes. And yeah, one more thing. So we installed a new Python library. So whenever you install something new in Python, you should update the requirements.txt file as well. So pip freeze requirements.txt to update the requirement.txt file. And need to add that as well. And then just a git commit and a commit message. I'll just write tutorial 2 changes and git push. Now that this is done, if you go back to the git repo, you would see that my changes have been pushed. So now using the git clone command, I can get this entire code into my server as well. So right now, nothing on the server. I'll do a git clone. If it is a Linux server, git would by default be installed in it. So just like that, my code is now here. Now I need to run this code. To run this code, first I'll need to install all the Python libraries, and it is better to do that in a virtual environment. That allows you to have multiple Django apps on the same server. So first we'll create a virtual environment using the same command. If virtualenv is not installed in your server, you'll get an error, and in that error it will suggest you the command to run to install virtualenv as well. Hi D4Dan, you're a bit late. Okay, so yeah, virtualenv is done. If you see, this is the virtualenv created. So let's just activate it, and now install all our libraries. So pip install -r requirements.txt. So this is done. Now basically I would be able to run my app in this server. Okay, wait. So I got an error that the port is already in use. Maybe there is something else running on this server. This is my testing server, so I'll just use another port. So let me use like 8080. Okay, it is running now. I got the error because I haven't applied the migrations, because this is the first time we are building this app in this server, so we'll have to migrate as well. So just to python manage.py manage.py. Done. Now let's start again. The server is started. Now this was the IP of our server, right? It would still not work, because when we were accessing the server locally, we were accessing it by an IP address followed by the port. Our app here is running on the 8080 port. By default, if you are calling a web address and you are not specifying the port, then it would take the port 80 or the port 443, but in our case it would take the port 80. By the way, there is no difference between like calling a website by an IP address versus calling it by a name such as google.com. So this is just like a DNS, what this is just a domain name and a DNS, and a domain name is basically mapped to an IP address. So when you call www.google.com, this request goes to a DNS resolver. It will get an IP address which is corresponding to this particular domain name, and then it will redirect to that IP address. So this is just the same thing as opening a website. Okay, so I think the most obvious thing to do would be to just add a port number over here, and since we are running on our app on the port 8080, so we'll try with 8080. It will still not work, and as you can see, if this would have worked, we would have gotten some logs over here, because whenever we run our server over here, when we open our apps, we see the logs over here that these are the requests which are coming to the server. We are not seeing any logs on our Linux server. This means that while we are trying to access this IP on this port, we are not receiving the request. Our Django app is not receiving the request, and the reason for that is whenever you create a new server on AWS or DigitalOcean or any other platform, by default all the ports will not be open. So ports like 8080 or 8000 or 9000 or 3000 won't be open. Generally you would just have the port 80 and the port 443 open, which is why we are not able to access our Django server, because it is running on the port 8080 and that is not open. Okay, so I guess port 80 is open, so the next logical thing to do would be to run our Django app on the port 80, right? Let's see what happens if we try that. So I'll now try to run my Python app on port 80, and I get an error because I don't have permission to run on that particular port, which is generally the case. Most applications wouldn't have the permission to run on port 80. So now I'm stuck. What should I do now? So what is done generally in this situation is you used some other application or some other server which is allowed to run on port 80, and then you ask that particular server to redirect all the requests it is getting on port 80 to another port, which in our case would be the port 8080. What I'll use today for doing that is something called Nginx. So Nginx is quite a popular tool used in deployment. It's just a web server. It's nothing, I mean, it is quite complicated as well, but for most use cases you don't need to go into that much detail of Nginx. So first let us just install Nginx. So for that you do sudo apt-get install Nginx. By the way, don't feel bad if you are not able to get all this stuff, because in most cases if you are working as a developer, your job would just be writing code and pushing that code to GitHub. After that, actually deploying the code is the job of a DevOps guy, not yours. So it is still fine if you don't know all this stuff, but I just thought it would be interesting for you guys. So Nginx is installed. Once you install Nginx, it will start running automatically. So if I go back to this particular IP, I should or maybe I think I'll need to restart Nginx, so let me do that. Sudo service Nginx, and let me check the status. So yes, Nginx is running. Okay, I think I know what the problem here is. So once you have installed Nginx, you have to configure it as well. To do that, you go to sudo vim/etc/nginx/conf. Sorry. Yep. Yes. So I had configured it earlier for while I was testing this out. Yeah, it is right now configured to proxy pass to the port 8000. So if you see what's happening here is it is taking the request at the coming in at the 80 port. So it is listening to the port 80 and then it is forwarding it to the port 8000. So we need to change this to 8080 because we are running our application on the port 8080. Okay, and then we need to restart Nginx. Okay, it's running. Now let us start our application. Let us try this one more time. Hopefully this works. Yep, so this works. And if you go back to this, you can see that we are getting the logs here. So the requests are being forwarded to our Django app. So for our admin panel, we need to go to this /admin. We won't be able to log in because we haven't created any super user here, but yeah, this is deployed. Actually, if you want, you can check this out yourself as well. I'll see if I can post this in the chat. It's asking me to sign in. So yeah, we now have our app working on our Linux server. By the way, I can see that there are 7 people online right now. I don't know if everyone is watching or not. Can you guys just type something, anything, just a hi or something, so that I know that there are people watching? Cool. I got a DAF from Upendra. D for Dan is here as well. So I can see from the logs that at least 4 of you guys checked it. Cool. So this is not actually, we are halfway there. There is still one issue. So this is running on this particular terminal window. If I close this terminal window, after some time the app would stop working as well. If I try to do something else, I'll have to exit from the server first, and once I have exited, the app is not working. So this is not what we want, right? The app should always be up. How do we fix that? So there are loads of ways of doing that, which unfortunately I won't be able to cover everything, but I'll show you the easiest way to do that. So the easiest way is to use something called screen. So if you just type screen and press enter, you would see some information. Ignore that and press space. So you'll see just a normal terminal window, right? So now run your app again. So first activating, then running the app, on port 8080. Then the app is running again and it is up again. But the good thing now is if you press Ctrl A and D, you'll get out of the screen and you'll see the message detached from this particular screen. And although you can't see the app running right now, it will still stay running. Even if I close this terminal window, I open a new one, I'll log into the server. I'm in the server, I can do whatever I want, I can install new libraries or whatever, but my app is still running in the background. And if I ever want to see the logs, you just do screen-r, and you'll have to specify the ID, which in our case was 9140, and you'll get back to the instance of your app which was running. And to get out, just Ctrl AD. Okay. It's that easy. But of course, this is not something you should do on production. But if for a personal project or to get something up quickly, this I think is the best way to do it. So to recap, to deploy your Django app on a Linux server, you have to first create a server, you have to push your code to the server using GitHub, you have to set up your Django project on the server through virtual environment and installing all the required Python libraries. Once that is done, you have to install Nginx, and then you have to set up Nginx to proxy pass the request coming from the port 80 to whatever port you are running the Django app on, which in our case was port 8080. What this allows us to do is you can use the same server to run multiple Django applications. So you can have one Django application which is running on port 8080, one which is running on 8000, one which is running on 3000 or whatever, and then you can use Nginx to redirect the request to a particular Django app based on the URL. So maybe I can cover that in a later tutorial. Yeah, but I guess that is it for today. If anyone has any questions regarding this, regarding Python, regarding Django in general, let me know. By the way, if you guys like the tutorial, I would really appreciate if you could share this with your friends, or if you know anyone else who wants to learn Python and Django, and you could share it with them. I'm doing this for Django right now because I was working on a Django project, but I'm planning to make similar sort of tutorials for Python as well, and probably React as well, React.js, and maybe some basic HTML, JavaScript or something like that. So I'll mostly focus on beginner tutorial. I don't want to go into more complicated stuff right now. I first want to get like a catalog of beginner videos done first, and then move on to more complicated stuff. Yeah, but the biggest issue I'm facing right now is I don't know how to reach my target audience. So yeah, if you guys know anyone who might be benefited from this, please do share. Okay, I guess we can stop here. Any questions, then you can leave in the comments of this video. I think the recorded version would be up by tomorrow, I guess. Okay, I guess someone commented about React. Yep, I would do React. Yeah, I I I have avoided React for about a year or so because I started with Vue.js and I thought that React was. I had this misconception that React was complicated. But yeah, when I started doing React, I don't think there is a more simpler framework for a beginner than React. So yeah, in the future, you can expect more Python tutorials to come up and more maybe React tutorials to come up. Okay, guys, see you, I guess, next weekend. Bye bye.